Welcome to the Midlife Midsters podcast, your podcast for inspiration on being bold and saying yes to making the most of midlife.
Today, we're going to have a discussion about the dimensions of grief. I think in midlife, most of us at some point or another encounter grief in some form. It can be the loss of a family member, the loss of a friend, or the loss of something significant in our life that causes us to reflect on where we've been and where we're going. And so I'd like to start off this conversation by welcoming our fellow Midsters.
I'm Marla.
I'm Marianne.
And our friend Carmen is not with us today because she's on a business trip. Marianne and Marla, you guys have a particular take on grief right at this moment because this week coming up, there's going to be a charity event that is in honor of a friend of yours that you lost. And so I thought we would kick off this conversation by talking a little bit about what it felt like to lose a close friend.
I had a really interesting, let's just say, introduction to that loss. And I guess one of the challenges was that I felt like there was something else in the universe that was letting me know that she had died. And it was a night where there was an incredible storm in the middle of the night, lightning, just one of those like terrific, loud storms. And my dog woke me up about 2:30 in the morning. And this is a dog that doesn't wake me up in the middle of the night. And I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to put up an umbrella because I was afraid I would be struck by lightning. And when I came back in, I saw that I had missed phone messages. And I saw that I had some missed WhatsApp calls. And I thought it was, a butt dial or something. And so I ignored it. And then my dog woke me up again a few minutes later. And we went back outside. And when I came back in, I realized that there was a call. And I called Bob. And he said, Virginia is dead. And he was at the hospital in the emergency room. And that's how I got the news. And I really believe that she, through my dog, was making sure that I was there for him. And so my perspective really changed because I was playing a support role in that relationship and in that news. And it wasn't about me and the loss of one of my closest friends and what that meant to me. It was about supporting him in his grief.
That's interesting because it's like it affects the whole way that you approach the loss, because at some point you have to grapple too with the fact that you've lost someone and not playing a supporting role. So how did you make that transition, or did you?
So they moved to Costa Rica probably about a year and a half before my marriage fell apart. And when that happened, I felt like I was being abandoned by my friends. And there was an aspect of grief there. That was not a loss of the friendship, but they were people that we saw probably once a week, that close relationship. And so that changed. And so there was an aspect of grief there. And then I think that, I don't know. I don't know how much I've grappled or come to terms with that loss of that friendship.
And Marianne, you were also friends with Virginia.
Yes, I actually met her through Marla probably close to 20 years ago, 18, something like that, a very long time. And I loved V. So I found out about that death because Marla called me shortly after, I guess, she found out. And I remember I'd never experienced this before, but I had to hold myself up. And I was so surprised by it. I didn't have the signs. Like you had some signs, it seems like, through the evening that something was wrong. And of course, with the dog.
But I didn't
in
have,
retro.
I didn't have any signs. It was that the dog woke me up, so I was there to take It's
the phone call. So they were flying here in part because a friend and myself were throwing a 60th birthday party for Marla. And so that entire day was an text exchange between me and V. So it was very unexpected. Like V thought she was coming over here. She was listing all the things she wanted me to kind of locate for her suitcase, telling me about her hair dye. She'll get it. I'll get it. How excited she was to celebrate Marla's 60th birthday. And then next thing I know is we're still going to celebrate a beautiful person here, her 60th birthday. But I was grieving what I thought that was even going to look like at a celebration. And another friend of ours, Barb, was hosting it. And she, of course, knew V and Bob as well. I got to know V through you, but then I had this wonderful privilege of being friends of both of them in a time where my son was sick. We'd bought this house out on the bay, wanted a boat, but I didn't know how to boat. I mean, we did have a sailboat at one point. I grew up, water skiing around boats. But actually, Bob, V's husband, was the one that actually taught me to basically powerboat and not sailboat. And then the other thing is she was so fearful of water or of what was in the water. She wasn't going to get on the boat, but she said, for you, I'm going to. And she was so proud. She lifted up her shorts and she had strapped to her a knife for the sharks. I'm like, there's no sharks. So her spirit was always so vibrant. It was celebrating other people. She was so excited about this. And it just made me so sad that this was the time that she was not going to be there. So yes, I knew V. I loved V. I loved her hugs. I loved her smile. I loved how she loved friendships and friends. They were precious to her. And Marla was precious to her. It was a huge loss and still is.
I think, and I'm just curious, like when you lose a friend, it's different than losing a family member. I mean, most of us, I think, in midlife have grappled at some point, and we'll be talking later in the season about grappling with losing parents. And that seems like in the natural order of things. But just like losing a child is not in the natural order of things, losing a friend when you're at this stage of life, it feels a little abrupt. And I think it brings us face to face with our own mortality. And I wonder if either of you reflected on that at all in the wake of Virginia's death.
I did. It was like, if this can happen to her, it can happen to any of us. And the other thing that made me realize is to hold on to your friends, tell them that you love them, because I could be gone tomorrow too. And so that piece of it, facing mortalities, I don't want to be gone and people not know how much I love them and care for them. And I am more deliberate about that today, in part because I have lost other friends as well, but V was a big loss. So, and she always seemed to tell you that she loves you and where she, how she felt about you. But losing a friend changes a landscape that's unexpected. I expect my landscape to change when I lose my parents and older people in my life. But to lose somebody close to your own age, unexpected, that's an unexpected change in your relationship landscape that it does make you feel mortal.
So really an interesting question. And we were talking about like that feeling of mortality. I don't even know, and I'm not sure why, and I'll have to, delve into this with my therapist. Even when I was diagnosed with a malignant melanoma, in the early days of the pandemic, I don't know that I thought about, wow, I might die. And I know, Marianne, you've said, that sure I could have, but I don't think that I went there. And I think, again, that just might be a denial mechanism that I have perfected over the years. And I have actually worked to be much more in touch with my feelings and emotions, but really believe with Virginia that so much of my introduction to that loss was centered around, her husband and her children, and how do we do something positive that I don't know. And maybe I'm going to do this now. I mean, I feel her loss. I feel sadness. I cry at different moments when I wish she was there, and I share those with Bob. I share those memories. But I also feel that somehow spiritually, and maybe this just had a lot to do with timing of so many major things happening in my life, that I see and try to feel the universe keeping her somewhere in my life. We talked about this. You brought white mums,
Yes,
to my backyard for it wasn't a memorial service, but it was a get together,
celebration.
a celebration of her life. And I remember you saying, well, mums are annuals, but sometimes if you put them in the ground, they will come back. And I have one planted in a spot where I put some of her ashes where the butterfly bush didn't make it, but just this season, that white mum came back in that spot. So I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know, I do know what it means. It means she's there. It means her spirit is there. And for some reason, and again, I don't know why, this loss of a good friend, and maybe it's her, like maybe because she was so connected with animals and the environment and that strength and beauty of spirit, that her spirit is around my world. And so there's, I don't know.
And I think that's the gift of friendship. I think when you do lose somebody like V, I lost V, the gift of that friendship was for me to be able to reflect on my relationship with her enough to realize that I want my friends to know how much I care and how much I love. And, their spirit will, whether they're here today or 10 years or 20 years, it does live on in me. It really does. We're pieces of all of this. Our personalities are formed in ways like this, these emotions and experiences that we have. And honestly, my friendship with V, the best of it, is part of me now.
And there's another aspect of this, which is you all joined together with some other folks to do something to keep V's spirit alive in a bigger and more I won't say more meaningful. I'm sure it was meaningful to be her friend, but in a way that spreads that meaning to others. And I thought maybe you could talk about that a little bit, how you took that grief and turned it into a good thing.
I'll let Marla take the lead on that, because actually she woke up one morning and said, I know what we're going to do, Marianne.
I think a reaction that many of us have when we find out that somebody has died is, what can we do? Can we send flowers? Can we send meals? Can we make a donation somewhere? And so Bob and I were talking about where could people donate? And he had some very specific thoughts about the type of organization and what it would do and how it would support women and children and people who were in maybe abusive environments. And so I started doing all this research online, and we found a place. Oh, and we didn't want it to be political. We wanted it to just be for those people, because there were some organizations that were associated with political figures who had started it. There was a program at a hospital in San Diego that really seemed perfect for what we wanted to do. And so we just sort of sat on that. I reached out to different friends. I shared that with Bob. And the next day, I woke up and I knew exactly what we needed to do. And I called Marianne. And this fits so well with our Midsters group, because I had met Carmen through Marianne and in those early days of the pandemic. And I remember our conversations about how the Doorways organization was helping people in our community who were in abusive relationships that were heightened because of the stresses of the pandemic. And so we had been talking about this organization that I actually had known about for many years. And I said, oh my God, we need to call Carmen and we need to see if Carmen can speak with the people at Doorways and create a fund in Virginia's name through Doorways.
And I will say Carmen was on the executive board of Doorways at that time.
And Doorways is a shelter, correct?
Yeah, it is a shelter for basically mothers and their children who are escaping domestic violence.
Yeah, a safe house. And it's in the community. And Virginia was a physician working in the community for decades. And it just couldn't have been the more appropriate and perfect thing to do. And everybody said yes.
So Doorways was wonderful because when Northern Virginia Alliance League decided to pick this charity, it was going to fund the Virginia's fund, and which specifically is aimed at the children. So giving good mental health, art therapy, very specific things for the children to be able to deal with the trauma that they've had. Doorways does a lot for the adults, and they do a lot for the children, but there is a need in this particular spot that allows these funds to go and help those children, and V would have loved that.
Yeah, one of the things, and I think we were talking about like her spirit and how do you take your grief and turn it into something that can be a positive. She was the champion of the underdog, and always, as a physician, as a friend, always was looking to help others however she possibly could. That generosity of time and spirit, but really of supporting those people who needed to be held up and strengthened, whether it was through art therapy or learning self-defense so that you could, move forward in your life with that confidence. So this really, she'd be very proud of us.
And I'm so thankful for Doorways because honestly, if I was a lot younger, I don't know if younger is the word, actually a great analogy, but saying yes and being bold in midlife, like you just knew that Doorways would do this. And we just took this bold position that this is something that needs to be done. How can we make this work? And I know all of us in this stage of life, we expect to lose our elders, but to lose somebody so young and a friend it's very different. And I spoke about that a few minutes ago about changing the landscape of that. But talking about midlife in general and grief, I know you guys have thoughts, not just on V, but other losses as well.
So there's an interesting parallel with the story of V's memorial and the upcoming event for Northern Virginia Alliance League. Marion and I are both members of NVAL. And every year NVAL does a fundraiser and raises money for a different charity. And a few years ago, I was, during the pandemic, I was tasked with running the event for that year. And there was a woman that was doing our sponsorships for that year who was really just a total dynamo. It's not like I was a deep friend with her as you all were with V, but I got to know her very well working on this. Liked her a great deal. And at one point during the run up to the event, I said to her, you and I have got to get together. We have to have lunch. We have to have coffee. Like, I want to get to know you better. And a month later, she died. And it was very unexpected. I think she knew that she was dying, but no one else knew. And it was like a gut punch. And some of it was the sort of sense of mortality, like when someone dies, which we've talked about. But also, I think for me, it was this like, wow, you just do not know what is going to happen in life. Like here we were working on this project, totally vital woman with energy, boundless energy, and then she just died. And so it's scary to see the underpinnings of your world disrupted in an unexpected way. And death is definitely one of those things. Although, as we all know, there are other things that happen in midlife that also create that disruption in your plan, right?
That's true. I actually knew this individual as well, but not very well. And when that happened, I have to tell you, it hit me as well. But if I were to describe it, it was regret. regret for not getting to know this individual more. You're right. She was vibrant. She was full of life. And so now, and that's another thing that I've kind of learned from a death of somebody, not as close as like V. But if you have that instinct like you did, and you would have definitely, I know you, Leslie, and you would have had lunch, y'all would have definitely spent time and nurtured a relationship there had you given the opportunity. But when we see people in our lives and we want them in our lives, we need to put them in our lives.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit before actually sitting down to record this about there's an important thing, like some of the losses that you go through in midlife are deliberate. And we talked about this in our episode on friendship. You do have to sometimes cut people off. And that's the twin side of what you're talking about. You also have to recognize and honor those people that present themselves in your life that are positive forces. And then you have to terminate the friendships that are negative forces. And there's a lot of grief with that as well. It's really sad to let a friendship go. Again, it disrupts sort of the pattern, the landscape, as you say, Marianne, of your life. But sometimes it's really important to do that.
I think it just goes back to our motto of boldly saying yes, right? It's about being true to life, about being open to positive and negative experiences that present themselves, and figuring out what you take from it and how you move forward with that. And I think that, part of, we talk about midlife, and we do have wisdom through our friendships, through our life experiences. And sometimes, you don't think you do, right? Until you say something or somebody shares back with you something that you said, and realize how, we are continually moving our lives forward in a trajectory that can be very positive and should be very positive, but that is colored and affected by all those decisions that we're making and all those experiences that do happen to us.
And all those people we choose to bring within our circle, and those that we regrettably have to eliminate from the circle.
Yes, I think as, we move forward through our life and know where we are in life, and we have another stage or two, hopefully, in our life, that letting go is actually not allowing your environment to be polluted by things that you don't want. I want to collect the positive things. I want to surround myself with that type of energy. And as hard as it is, and we will grieve letting some things go, but the benefits from that will be rewarded throughout the rest of our lives. I believe that.
There's one other aspect of grieving loss of people in our lives that I think it's kind of important to touch on, and that's sometimes it happens very suddenly, as it did for you guys with Virginia. Sometimes it happens very deliberately when we have to make a decision. But sometimes loss can be a long, slow process. And I will say, from my own perspective, I'm kind of going through a situation right now, or sort of watching a situation right now, where the last of my parents' generation, an aunt with whom I'm particularly close, very fond of, is in the end stages of her life. And I've seen this before with my mother-in-law, who had a sort of protracted decline. And it's a time to say goodbye. It's a long, slow goodbye, and sort of treasuring those last moments, and sort of making the best of that. I can't really do that with my aunt because she doesn't live anywhere near me. I do try to check in with my cousin to see how she's doing. It feels inadequate. I wish that I could be there with her, because I know at some point she'll be gone. And even though I don't see her, I haven't really spent a lot of time with her, it's a loss. It's a loss from the constellation of my life, right? And I think that when you have that long, slow goodbye, it's a challenge of its own. I don't know if you all have ever had that kind of a loss.
I'm having it right now. I mean, my mom has end-stage Alzheimer's and has had this for, we talk about, it's probably been 10 years now, but end-stage for several years now. And that loss, that slow, steady decline. She's still alive. She still smiles when she sees me, but that's it.
That lingering of those feelings of grief
is tough.
Has to be really hard. Grief is hard and death is hard, but hanging on to the life of that individual, one of the things that I love over recent years that I've seen a change, they used to always call it a funeral and a wake, but the word funeral always kind of bothered me because it had such a finality to it, I guess. But I love that people now are having celebration of life. It brings the positivity to it. So in that darkness of grief, to celebrate that individual's life is really special. And I don't know when my day's going to come, but have a celebration of life. I do not want a funeral. Yeah,
I totally get that. It's nice to focus on the positive things that someone left behind.
It's true. But I know the lingering that you guys are talking about, I've never personally experienced that, but it must be horrendous. It must be horrible.
It creates a lot of ambivalent feelings. Like when my mom also had a very slow decline. Well, I mean, relatively slow. It was over the course of about 9 months. And it was very apparent from the beginning that this was it. It was just a protracted process. And it just stirs up so many uncomfortable feelings because on the one hand, you don't want the person to leave this world. But on the other hand, watching them suffer, there's like a feeling of, oh, please, let's end, and you don't want to say that out loud. You don't want to even think that, but you see that that's where it's headed.
But that's love.
It's an aspect of love.
It is
sure.
An aspect of love, not wanting somebody to go through that.
It also is, I think, the more, and this is another topic we might touch on is end of life and how more often than not it is that slow, drawn out, and not an abrupt end.
Right. Well, what I would say is for all those listeners, embrace those people that are in your life. Love them. Let them know how much you care. And the grief process in losing them will be much easier. There will not be regret because you've actually let them know exactly how you feel. Take that goodness.
And celebrate their lives while they're still alive.
That's a good point, Leslie Ann.
Yeah.
And also, like you said, they're in our being, right? Every relationship, every lesson, every story,
they're
every
part
memory
of us.
Become part of you.
I love that.
Thanks for joining us with this episode of the Midlife Midsters podcast. If you don't already follow us, you can find us at www.americanmidsters.com. And if you're interested in the fund that we talked about today that was created in honor of Marla and Marianne's dear friend, it's the Virginia McCaffrey Fund for Children at Doorways. You can find them online. And we hope you'll join us on future episodes.